Welcome, new Templars. A145 the map maker here to once again do a little additional analysis on what could be the biggest peace deal ever made, the end of the 3,000 years of human sacrifice in the Holy Land. It has been an interesting week, I would say a little bit of a slower week. People still processing this big deal that happened last week. We have, so we're looking at the Gaza Peace Summit essentially. And what has come to my attention that really informed me much more deeply on this subject was the 60 Minutes interview with Jared Kushner and Steve Witkoff, which it has become pretty abundantly clear that, while Trump takes credit for this deal, of course, he ordered these people to go make the deal, but it was really Jared and Steve that was very much responsible for this deal. And I think that 60 Minutes interview revealed a lot of the behind the scenes information that I have not heard anywhere else. And it's always good to hear it directly from the people that were actually there, that actually did it. And, it's an interview, they could be manipulating the audience or deceiving people, but I'm getting a very genuine sense from these people. And even Jared Kushner, I feel like gets a lot of hate. I listen to Nino, and Nino's always saying, like, I don't trust Jared, this and that. Everyone's saying, Jared's a Jew. He owns 666 Fifth Avenue. Like, Ivanka married him for whatever reason. Like, she converted to Judaism. I see that as a very smart, strategic, political, and even spiritual alliance, because this is what kings and nobility have done for centuries. You marry into who could be, or you marry into the group that could potentially be your enemy, thereby making them your ally and strengthening your kingdom or your empire. This is like common sense. So I don't see this as a bad thing at all. I definitely see the potential for peace in the Middle East as a good thing. But of course, we still have a lot of haters out there who are, saying that MAGA has turned into MIGA, which is Make Israel Great Again, that Trump's in Israel's pocket, that the Jews are running everything. And so this video is just, additional analysis on all those subjects. And I'm still very much myself in the camp of the MAGA, of trusting the maestro, of, seeing everything on the board. There are things that concern me. Obviously, all the death and destruction in Gaza does concern me. But, just keeping my eye on the bigger picture. And, once again, you're trying to dispel the black pillars, trying to keep you and the audience out there hopeful of the future, which, is not just for the purpose of keeping you hopeful. It's because I'm hopeful, and I don't like when all these other people are trying to like bring the maestro down and insult Jared Kushner when I think that he's done a good job on this peace deal. Now we're going to look at, are there ulterior motives here? Is he just trying to get the real estate development deal there? But we'll get to all that. And so, this week, like I said, the news in general has been somewhat quiet. So we're going to focus on like the dynamics of this peace deal and who's working for who is what I'm always interested in. Going back to the Traders and Alliances map, I'm always interested in who is a free thinker, who is independent, who's working for who is COINTELPRO in the media that is promoting this new form of TDS, which it has been said, I'm not sure where I heard it, but it definitely made sense to me. And I've also been seeing it and thinking it myself, that Make Israel Great Again is the new form of TDS. Of course, we still have the old form of TDS is alive and well, as we saw at the No Kings protest. But it would seem that the deep state, which is still out there in some capacity, is making a bold attempt to give the far right their own form of TDS by associating Donald Trump more so with Israel and trying to make people think that, he's Israel first instead of America first. And so they've really had this shift in strategies. And so I want people out there to be more conscious of influencers, channels that are painting Trump in that light, and just think for yourself, is this to have the effect of trying to turn you against him? without doing your own research, just by listening to something that stimulates you emotionally, that's inflammatory, as opposed to really looking at all the pieces on the chessboard, which is what we like to do, the 40,000-foot view. And there's a lot of evidence that he's not Israel's puppet, and we're going to get to more of that from this week later in the video, specifically like J.D. Vance's visit to Israel and Trump's statement on the West Bank, which was very strongly worded, which we have here. So we'll get to that later too. So I'm going to pull up a couple images here to start kicking this off. This is the main one that we're kind of focused on here, like trying to analyze his character. And so, I mean, basically, I would encourage all of you to watch the 60 Minutes interview. I'm going to try to make this a summary of it, which usually that doesn't end up being such a summary. But, the best thing is to hear it from the horse's mouth. And so we're going to have that link is in the description of this video as we're streaming it. Watch mine first, obviously, but then, I would encourage you to see the whole thing, to really analyze the body language, the temperament, because you'll see he is chill as a cucumber. I mean, if this was my son-in-law, I would send him to be a diplomat in the most war-torn region of the world too, because this dude, he just seems chill. And in the 60-minute interview, the host of that show, named Leslie Stahl, is clearly deep state, is clearly like interrogating them, is clearly trying to insinuate, that they're in this to make profits for themselves and do some kind of big real estate deal, which I have problems with that theory. I think that may be a part of it. I mean, these are real estate developers, especially Trump. But I don't think that was the main motive. I mean, they already have resorts all over the world in regions that don't already have, a huge city that's one of the most concentrated, populated, dense, and dangerous regions of the world. Like, why would they choose that region? They say, it's great weather, but like, so is the entire Mediterranean coast. So is Tel Aviv. So is, Alexandria, or whatever they call that city now. So is the whole coast of Egypt and Morocco. And there's plenty of places for the Trump family to build a resort. They're already building them in Qatar and Dubai and Saudi Arabia. It's like, I don't think Trump's goal is to have a resort in literally every city, including the most dangerous ones. So there has to be, that can't be like the only motive here, because there's plenty of other options. Like, he could build a resort in Tel Aviv, in Israel. There's so many other options. And so why Gaza? Well, it's clearly why Gaza for Israel, because Israel wanted the Greater Israel Project. They wanted Gaza. They want West Bank, which is clear. They just voted on annexing West Bank this week. And hopefully that will be basically like an empty political maneuver. They're already expanding into Syria. I was actually looking at a map of Israel and Syria on Google Earth, and there's literally a region that's like the Golan Heights, which is the region that Israel is now claiming. If you look up cities in that region, the map does not say that those cities are from either country. So it's like Israel knows its border is like here, and should be the border of Syria, but the map is now saying that the cities in the region that Israel has pushed into Syria literally have no nationality, which is quite strange. So again, it's usually Khazarian Mafia deep state controlling these maps in the first place, so that says something. But like, so I'm gonna play, okay, so I want to kick this video off with something that I'll be very upfront, like, I disagree with it, but I sort of enjoy reviewing clips that I disagree with because they challenge me to question my own beliefs. And so I'm going to play this clip that is a Reese report, which I'm sure a lot of you have heard of Reese report. Greg Reese was associated with InfoWars for a time. I believe he got fired from InfoWars for essentially being anti-Trump. He puts together very good clips. If that clip's all you watch and all you study, you're pretty much going to agree with him. However, it's always good to do your own research, and the most viral clip is not always the most truthful statement. And so this is one of these clips that I'll show, like this image. Like this is the problem here of the people. I mean, it's not a problem if people can have their own opinions, but this is the shift of sentiment on the far right that obviously people like 𝖯𝖚𝖚 is also pushing, who's becoming more and more popular, who's clearly, to me, some kind of an agent, has Jesuits whispering in his ear. I was MAGA until I became MIGA. So let's watch this Reese report clip, and then I'll talk about that, and then the rest of the video will be essentially disproving it. So here we go.
During the 1980s, Benjamin Netanyahu became good friends with American real estate developers Charles Kushner and Fred Trump. Kushner's son, Jared, went on to marry Fred's granddaughter, 𝖊𝖚𝖚 Trump. Jared has been talking about the valuable real estate in Gaza for a few years.
In Gaza's waterfront property, it could be very valuable.
In May of 2024, the Jerusalem Post publishes an image of Netanyahu's Gaza 2035 vision. In October of 2024, candidate Trump said that Gaza could be better than Monaco.
It could be better than Monaco. It has the best location in the Middle East, the best water, the best everything. It is the best. I've said it for years. I mean, it could be the most beautiful place. The weather, the water, the whole thing, the climate. It could be so beautiful.
On his inauguration day, President Trump began discussing Gaza in terms of valuable real estate.
You know, Gaza is interesting. It's a phenomenal location. On the sea, best weather. You know, everything's good. It's like some beautiful things could be done with it, but it's very interesting. But some fantastic things could be done with Gaza.
How do you see the future in governance for Gaza?
Well, it depends. I can't imagine you could have, well, you certainly can't have the people that were there. Most of them are dead.
On February 4th, he referred to Gaza as the Riviera of the Middle East.
Everybody I've spoken to loves the idea of the United States owning that piece of land, developing and creating thousands of jobs with something that will be magnificent. I don't want to be cute. I don't want to be a wise guy, but the Riviera of the Middle East, this could be something that could be this could be so magnificent.
On February 26th, Trump posted a bizarre AI video of Trump Gaza. On April 7th, Trump describes Gaza as incredible oceanfront property.
Well, you know how I feel about the Gaza Strip. I think it's an incredible piece of important real estate, and I think it's something that we would be involved in, but, you know, having a peace force like the United States there, controlling and owning the Gaza Strip would be a good thing.
On July 14th, Trump referred to Israel's 2005 removal of its ground troops and settlements from the Gaza Strip as one of the worst real estate deals ever made.
I call it the Gaza Strip, one of the worst real estate deals ever made. They gave up the oceanfront property, one of the worst deals ever made.
On September 17th, Israeli Finance Minister Smotrich claimed the deal to rebuild Gaza was on Trump's desk and described it as a real estate bonanza.
There is a business plan built by the most professional people, which is on President Trump's desk. How this thing turns into a real estate bonanza, I'm not joking, it pays for itself. By the way, I started negotiations with the Americans, and I'm saying this seriously now because I'm also demanding. After all, we paid a lot of money for this war, so we need to share. How do we make percentages on land marketing later in Gaza? But now, no, not joking, the demolition phase, which is always the first phase in urban renewal, we did. Now we need to build.
Trump has chosen war criminal Tony Blair to oversee the rebuilding of Gaza. And on September 24th, the Central Synagogue in Manhattan explained how the gods demand human blood for humanity to survive.
The greatest lie humanity tells itself is that we have outgrown human sacrifice. We call it by different names now and make our offering to different gods. We offer young men we call soldiers, as if the designation means that their mothers cry less when they die. We call masses of humanity collateral damage and turn our eyes away from the pictures of their lifeless bodies as we sip our morning coffee. And the truth is, we don't do it because we are heartless. We do it because we believe that it is necessary for the world to keep running. We do it because we believe that the gods whose favor we so desperately seek, freedom, security, prosperity, flourishing, that they demand blood as the price of their favor. We do it because we cannot see any other choice. When Abraham prepares to sacrifice Isaac, he is just accepting the same bargain of blood we still accept today, that some need to die for the world to flourish.
Greg Reese reporting.
So there you have it. And, that clip at the end is one of the weirdest parts. I mean, it's certainly a pretty strange sermon at the synagogue. But it's also, in a way, it's kind of common sense. I mean, some Native Americans had to die for the USA to exist. It's like, for something to exist, something usually has to be replaced. But I wouldn't necessarily call that like human sacrifice. So yeah, they're trying to associate like that synagogue rabbi with, Trump and Kushner somehow. But I've already kind of described, I feel like I kind of preemptively debunked some of that in my opening for this video. It's like, well, why Gaza? Like, why choose the most dense, dangerous portion of this? There's a big Mediterranean coastline. I mean, there's even coastlines in all different parts of the world. So it doesn't necessarily make sense, like purely from like a real estate standpoint. So I want to start moving into, some of the debunking of some of these ideas. And once again, I believe that Reese report may be some form of like controlled opposition. There is definitely controlled opposition that pushes conspiracy theories that, part of it is true, of course, but then it's manipulating you into a certain viewpoint, which, surprise, surprise, is, turning against Trump. And another very interesting clip, which I don't have for this video, was Steve Bannon this week saying that Trump will run in 2028. And so think of that what you will. But I mean, Steve Bannon has been one of Trump's closest advisors, or at least, I'm not even an advisor, but he's been very central to the MAGA movement this whole time. And so for him, I am so over the exposure on this camera, like it's driving me crazy. But for Steve Bannon to say that Trump is definitely running in 2028 is a pretty strong statement. And so that would make a lot more sense why there's so much controlled opposition still trying to turn people against Trump, including turn the far right against Trump, if he does still have elections to win, if he even has to win them or not. But, this could end in like a civil war or revolution if they have their way, but hopefully not. So I want to pull up some other evidence here, let's call it, or just bullet points from my college friend here, Kag Drago, who's an artist. Just puts together some good points here about reasons why we could see that it's Trump more like not controlling Israel, attempting to control Israel, as opposed to the reverse of Israel being in control of Trump. So was just saying here, this is today's reminder that Trump removed Israel's pretext to drag us into war with Iran, forced Israel to tell Iran they no longer seek war, laid the foundations of a Palestinian state, stopped the Gaza war, and is stopping the Greater Israel Project and the annexation of the West Bank. I'll also add that he essentially annexed Gaza for the USA, or for this international security force, and stepped on Bibi's toes there, and did a lot of other things that would seem to be contrary to Israel's agenda. And you hear a lot more about this in the Kushner interview that we're going to get into. So this is the thumbnail from that interview, and they go into a lot of detail. Like I said, the host is extremely aggressive, as these hosts on mainstream MSM usually are, other than Fox News. And this is not Fox News. Actually, I'm not even sure which network this aired on. But we're going to get into all of that in just a moment here. But before we do, I want to put in a little promo for dsmp.io, the operation that keeps the New Templars running. And a few things to share for this video if you want to understand the real deep history of the conflict in the Middle East, as well as secret societies and the secret cults that have run our world and practiced this ancient religion of human sacrifice, like that rabbi was talking about. She's saying there used to be human sacrifice, but now we still do human sacrifice to different gods. Different gods. You're supposed to have one God, honey, in Judaism, but it essentially is the same God renamed. You know, Yahweh was from the Canaanite pantheon, which was most likely a renaming of the Sumerian pantheon, going back to Enki, Enlil, and Anu. So this is the cult of Baal packet, which is more of a specific packet that we offer at dsmp.io that focuses on that ancient cult and how it has evolved into the modern era. And so the centerpiece is the Cult of Baal mini poster, which is the only place you get that coloration of the mini poster, and includes the Octagon group, which is the most modern version of this cult. You know, this is essentially like the WEF cult, which is the main group that the MAGA movement is fighting against. And then we have like the Protocols of Zion and the deity chart as supplementary to fill out that packet. Now, if that packet is a little too specific for you, we have our primary Intel packet. And you can see all our packets in the packet section. But the Intel packet is the main one that's our most important diagrams. It even overlaps with a couple of those from the Cult of Baal packet, because the Cult of Baal is included in the Intel, but it goes into all the different subjects as well of health, energy, hierarchy, secret societies, CIA, and economic futures. Our newest product is our seed oils t-shirt, which this is a 100% cotton direct-to-garment seed oil t-shirt with the metal version of the logo on the front and a seed oil map, or at least a portion of it, on the back. So that is the new seed oil t-shirt. And then just want to feature a couple of our posters here, such as the healing web, always one of our most popular, but to remind everyone that the healing web did evolve in 2024 into the infinite life vortex. And so that is the infinite life vortex in my favorite size that we offer, which is the 40 by 40 lithograph. And this is our latest little promo image of the D.S.M.P gallery. One day it will exist in a gallery format. Actually, I think Art Basel is going on in Paris right now, which is where I would like to be featured. But of course, it's all of that is just abstract, like no-brainer, you know, like banana duct tape to a wall type art. There's some talent there, I'll say, but you know, there's nothing that's challenging politically, is not the theme of these modern art conventions. So with that, we're gonna play this 1 minute promo and then get straight into the details of what Kushner and Witkoff revealed in the 60 Minutes interview.
Truth seekers, are you ready to uncover the secrets they don't want you to know? At dsmp.io, we're not just a store. We're a portal to the unknown. Prints and posters that unveil hidden truths, from ancient mysteries to modern cover-ups. Fill your space with tapestries woven with cosmic secrets. Tap into the energy of hand-selected crystals to awaken your mind. Explore exclusive packets packed with forbidden knowledge. Cleanse your body and spirit with products designed to strip away the toxins of a corrupted world. In the chaos of today, we give you the tools to stay sharp and to stay awakened. This is more than shopping. This is a movement. Step through the portal. Discover the truth. dsmp.io. Truth disguised as art.
All right, so yeah, dsmp.io. And don't forget to like and subscribe on this video. And on the homepage of dsmp.io, sign up for our newsletter to be notified of all our new video drops, product launches, free downloads, expos, sales, and more. And our next expo is going to be the Body, Mind, Spirit Expo in Cincinnati, Ohio, my current hometown, November 22nd and 23rd. So with that said, let's get into some deep Kush-Ball analysis. I like to call Jared Kushner the Kush-Ball because it's like Trump just like throws the Kush-Ball into the most crazy situations, and he seems to come out on top a lot of the time. So when I watched this interview, like, I was not necessarily expecting one thing or another, but I really came away with it with like, this was like the perfect interview. I mean, the way Jared and Steve conducted themselves was like very professional, very calm, despite that host, Lesley Stahl, being very antagonizing. And like they've accomplished something here that like no one else has accomplished in a long time, which is, mediating between these two peoples, the Palestinians and the Israelis, that have this ancient blood feud with each other, just hate each other to death, want to essentially exterminate each other. And that is literally the two hardest people you could possibly try to mediate with. But somehow they have done it. And so this pretty long interview, it's like an hour, and so I'm going to summarize most of it, but they essentially began saying that Trump had delegated them a lot of authority to set up these deals. And at one point, Lesley, which I didn't even look her up, I remember her face, but I don't know her name off the top of my head. So Lesley was even essentially like probing them on, well, like, you're not supposed to negotiate with terrorists. And they were like, well, we asked Trump, like, if we have an opportunity to actually talk to Hamas and like try to get this deal made, can we talk to them? And Trump was like, of course, talk to them, make this deal. And Steve was saying that even though that was unconventional, because, the conventional thing is like, we don't negotiate with terrorists. Well, part of that is that, the terrorists are typically CIA assets, or in Hamas's case, Mossad assets, possibly. But that's like why these conflicts sometimes never get solved. It's because like they refuse to have a conversation, and it never makes any progress. It's always just guerrilla warfare, endless. And so they actually did meet with Hamas, and that's a little bit later in the interview, but they talked quite a bit about when Israel made the strike in Qatar. And this is another instance, I would say, when it's clear to me from what they're saying and from what I've heard from a lot of different sources that, Israel is not like controlling Trump, that Trump is trying to control Israel, but there are times when Israel, it is a separate country. They have their own government. Like, he's not in full control of Israel. He would like to be, but it's certainly not the other way around. Like, he wants to come off as, they have been historically our ally. And so there's a huge portion of his base that also considers Israel our ally, especially more so than Palestine. And so he has an obligation to his base as well to at least maintain cordial relations with our ally. And, also like the whole Jewish population, like, that believes that Israel requires our funding in order to continue existing, which may or may not be true. And I believe that that position may be changing, at least from our government's perspective, in the near future, because there are, more and more people saying that essentially funding should essentially be cut off. But for the time being, we're coming from a history of, 50 years of supporting this entity as sort of like the lily pad of American interest in that region. But, since Trump has come into office, America is changing its priorities. We're no longer on the conquering the entire Middle East, like 9 countries in 4 years plan that was instituted after 9/11. And so as America shifts our foreign policy under the Trump administration, so too does our relationship with Israel shift. And I think that's exactly what we're seeing right now. And we're seeing the Trump administration come down with a harder and harder line for Israel of what actions will be acceptable and what actions will not be acceptable. And we got to remember also that this whole Gaza conflict started under Biden. Even though Trump has claimed to have been, 46 commander-in-chief the whole time, I think that that is a complex claim. And, we have heard from 𝕯𝖊𝖚𝖚 that he was commander-in-chief from nuclear and above. And so the actions of foreign nations certainly would not have been under his purview, nor would necessarily like the budget of what we are funding Israel, what we're selling Israel. And I know that that clip that I just played, the Reese report clip, had the quote from Trump, which comes from his Knesset speech, talking about when Bibi wanted this weapon, we would give him it. When we wanted that weapon, we would give it. And oh, they were so good at using their weapons. And then they're superimposing that with images of blowing up children. Just keep in mind, like most of those children were, if they even were killed in the previous 2 years before Trump even became president again. And so that was a little misleading portion of the Reese report. And I think a lot of what Trump says in the Knesset speech, at least in terms of praising Bibi, is a little bit like two-faced and has like double entendres in there. And so the way that Jared and Steve talked about the strike of Israel in Doha, Qatar, which was totally like out of the blue. They were in the middle of trying to make a peace deal with Hamas, negotiated through these Qataris, and all of a sudden they wake up one morning and Israel has essentially killed half the people that they were trying to deal with over there in Doha. And they straight up described this as feeling like Israel had violated their trust, that Israel had essentially betrayed them in the process of trying to make this peace deal, and that ultimately they thought that it was a stupid move strategically for Israel to have done that. And the only way the peace deal moved forward after that was from Trump meeting in person with Bibi at the White House, and the famous picture, which I don't have queued up here, but the famous picture of Trump literally holding the phone, and what many have described as forcing Bibi to call Qatar, their king or whoever he called, I'm not sure exactly who he called, but calling Qatar to essentially apologize. And because of that apology was the only reason that this peace deal we're seeing now, this Gaza peace summit and Trump's 20-point plan, was able to move forward. So just like hearing them talk about that, it really gave me the sense of like Israel is kind of a loose cannon. Yes, we want to support our ally, but there are limits to that support. And we saw another limit reached, just this week when Israel's Knesset, I believe it was the opposition party, put forward the bill to annex the West Bank, and it passed. And so I'm not even sure what the status of that is now, but Trump has essentially said, capital N-O, like that is not going forward. And I do have a clip for that. Since I'm talking about it now, I might as well play it now. Things are getting a little out of order in this video, but you get all the information by the end. So we're going to go to the videos, and I think Reese Report's going to start playing again automatically, but I'm going to shift it. Okay, so bear with me for a second here.
Did you promise leaders this week that you would not allow Israel to annex the West Bank? Is that something that you...
I will not allow Israel to annex the West Bank. No, I will not allow it. It's not going to happen.
Did you speak with Netanyahu about this directly?
Yeah, but I'm not going to allow it. Whether I spoke to him or not, I did. But I'm not allowing Israel to annex the West Bank. There's been enough. It's time to stop now, okay? Yes.
So yeah, I'm really getting the sense, even from like the emotion of that and everything, that Trump has like had it with Israel trying to fulfill the Greater Israel Project and attacking and annexing all of its neighbors. And so like he's on board with this peace plan. I mean, he has made it very clear he wants to be the president of peace. I even got this in the mail. I wanted to hold it up. It's not going to be like the main part of the video, but I got like a free Epic Times in the mail that was, front page Man of Peace. I don't know if, like, I don't subscribe to Epic Times, and so this is like a sample issue. And I think this just kind of shows like how historic this peace deal may actually have been, how historic the meeting at the Knesset and the meeting in Egypt really have been. It's kind of cool to see this like in a newspaper, like the Peace 2025, like, even though in some ways it seems like it might be hyperbole or the peace deal might not fully go through, the signage and the verbiage and a lot of things about it seem like they're essentially trying to manifest it. You know, this is how we manifest things. Like we say they exist before they even do exist. And so I think that is the strategy here. You know, even though there are questions, there are details to be still figured out, that the Trump administration is manifesting this peace in a lot of ways, and, you know, very visibly on the global stage, that now that we have had these meetings in the Knesset and in Egypt with all these world leaders, if Israel changes its mind and says, no, actually, we do want to annex Gaza and the West Bank, like, they are going to be the ones that are alienated throughout the whole world, which in a lot of ways they already are. So getting further deeper into this speech, Leslie asked the two of them about their business conflicts of interests. Are they blurring the lines between business and foreign policy? And are they benefiting financially from redeveloping the Gaza Strip? And Jared just said, what people call conflicts of interest, we call trusted relationships throughout the world. And so, yeah, I mean, then they said that their title should be Secretary of Correcting Miscommunications. Like I said earlier, you know, they are being like the liaisons between two nations of people. Even you call them like two different races of people. Some of them are literally the same Arab race. They just happen to be different religions, but that are like hell-bent on essentially exterminating one another. And so this is quite a task at hand. About the Doha bombing, of Israel bombing Doha in the middle of their peace negotiations, that everyone they were working with got murdered. They both felt betrayed. Trump was pissed off. He felt the Israelis were getting out of control. They literally said Trump felt the Israelis were getting out of control, and that it was the time to be strong and stop them from doing things that were not in their best long-term interests. So that, to me, I mean, whether it's true or not, whether that's really dynamic, like I got the truth vibration from some of these statements. And so like I do get the sense that Trump was not happy with that move. And clearly it was a flagrant violation of international standards and norms and treaties to, you know, bomb Qatar, was trying to like mediate this peace deal. So then they're talking about the phone call of the apology, which they said was pivotal, like the peace deal would not have happened without that. And then the main four goals of the peace plan for them, and I think for both sides as well, Israel and Hamas, was the hostage release, the ceasefire, and getting humanitarian aid in. And so that lays like the groundwork for potentially redeveloping Gaza. And their strategy was to get Qatar, Egypt, and Turkey all on board, who were the main Muslim nations who had influence over Hamas. Now, I mean, I think that like Iran had influence as well, but they weren't part of these peace talks. But, you know, Qatar hosts their leadership. And so Qatar is probably like the central one. Egypt's the neighbor who has been involved in previous wars with Israel in the past. And I can't really say exactly why Turkey is Ottoman Empire, you know, but they seem to be a little bit more disconnected, but they have a very strong military as well, and they're part of NATO. And so, you know, what they say essentially in the region like goes in a way. And if they got involved in a war with Israel, like it could be decisive. So Israel had killed all the leadership of Hamas since October 7th. So essentially the entire leadership of Hamas had been like 100% or maybe even 200% turnover since October 7th. So they're not even dealing with the same people who allegedly ordered this original attack. And I think I've said in previous videos, you know, we can't be restarting a war for every, you know, petty crime or act of violence in the Strip. It's not even ordered by the leadership. So it's like, if an Israeli soldier gets shot in Gaza, like we can't, it's absurd misuse of force to like bomb the entire Strip when it could just be one person's crime that needs to be punished. And so they actually did, Steve and Jared did meet with Hamas at Sharm el-Sheikh before the big meeting that you saw with Trump. And they spoke to them directly. They met with 4 Hamas representatives, with the Qataris, the Egyptians, and the Turks. And the Hamas representative his actual son had been killed in that Doha attack. So he was, personally upset, but they negotiated it out. And actually at the end of that meeting, that private meeting with Kushner, Witkoff, and all those parties, they said that the Qataris were actually hugging with the Israeli party at the end of it. And it was like a very beautiful scene that they wished could have been, broadcast for the bigger audience of the world. But I don't believe that that was a televised meeting. A lot of these things that we're going to be talking about haven't really been televised much. That's why I found this interview so interesting, because these weren't events that we saw on like the White House YouTube page. And I wasn't even aware that a lot of this was going on in the background. They weren't doing like a reality show at the same time, it seemed. But they did have a few public appearances that we're going to get to here in a second. So at the same time, they have long-standing relationships with Israel. They have essentially all these people on, I won't say speed dial, but like in their Rolodex. They can call up the leaders of any of these countries because they've been they've done the Abraham Accords already, so he's close with, I wouldn't say close necessarily, but has like a business relationship with Netanyahu, with the leaders of all these different Muslim countries. And so they were very much a part of Israel getting on board with this peace plan as well, because Israel didn't come up with this. The Trump 20-point peace plan incorporated, I think, like the original 4 or 10 Israeli peace plan points. And so, it took what Israel wanted out of a peace plan and added more to it to make it amenable to Hamas as well, because both parties have to agree for a peace plan to work. At one point, Leslie said that people had been referring to Jared and Steve as Bibi's babysitters, because when Israel actually signed on to the peace plan, they had been meeting with Bibi, and then Bibi brought them into a meeting with his cabinet, which they needed to get their sign on as well to sell them on the peace plan and the idea. And apparently it was like Steve and Jared sitting on either side of Bibi. Essentially, from what it sounds like, she's calling it babysitters, which is like a cute word for it. But essentially, it was like Bibi and Steve Jared and Steve were Bibi's handlers in this peace plan. And so I think that paints a very different picture of the relationship than what a lot of these black pillars would like to suggest of, Israel controlling the USA through AIPAC and all this stuff, which of course they do for a lot of politicians. But, this is the new administration. This is the new way of doing things. And of course, Bibi's used to the old way of doing things. He's used to probably calling the shots and, threatening people with Mossad and assassinations or whatever. If this is still even Bibi is another big question here. If this is not like the mask replacement Bibi or not. But, it's a new dynamic of Trump's ambassadors are now the handlers of Bibi, even when he goes and talks to his own cabinet. And so that's a very different dynamic than like what the Reese report was presenting, I think. And they had one person in the cabinet, Ben Gavir, apparently started lecturing Steve Witkoff and was very rude. And like it didn't go over well with the whole cabinet. So it's like they had Bibi on board, but not everyone in the cabinet was on board. But fortunately, I'm not sure if the cabinet had to vote or not, but like, it was basically came down to, I think, Bibi's decision, or I'm not sure if the Knesset voted as well, but, they had to sell it essentially. And they did, they sold it. They were asked about the cost of rebuilding Gaza, which they said would be in the $50 billion range, less or more. And the Middle East and the EU would participate significantly in the cost of that. A very interesting point was that they said that we have a master plan already on the rebuilding of Gaza. So I'm not sure if that's like city planning or like what that essentially entails. That would be, I'm not going to say incriminating that like they have planned like who gets what in terms of like the land plots and priority in terms of where they're going to actually build like a new city there or towers or whatnot. But they're saying they have a master plan and that the Board of Peace will award the contracts. Jared and Steve actually went to Gaza. He said it looks like a nuclear bomb went off. The Gazans have begun putting their tents on where their property once was on the rubble. So they still think that they own the property that they used to own, even if it's like an apartment building. Like, that's not going to work if everyone like everyone in Unit C is going to be having their tent on the same space. And Gaza was predominantly apartment buildings, so they might have a little bit of like a forced relocation, coming to them like one way or another, because it's not going to be the same apartments as it was in the original building. It's not going to be the same layout even. So there's going to have to be some relocations happening, like, is the bottom line. That shouldn't surprise anybody. But one of the most interesting other parts, I think, that I had not heard about before was that they actually did do this rally in Israel with Steve, Jared, and Ivanka, which I actually did see, I think, pictures of this before, but they actually played clips of this. And what was really interesting was that anytime, well, it seemed like the crowd was very friendly towards them. You see they have the hostages pictures in the background. This was like a rally for the hostages families, like kind of, I think, presenting this peace deal prior to it actually being fully ratified. And they said that, well, they even showed the video of every time they would say Trump's name, the crowd would cheer. And every time they said Bibi's name, the whole crowd of Israelis would boo. And so that really showed you how popular Netanyahu is in his own country at this point. And the other thing that happened this week was a huge group, like thousands of the Hasidic Jews from Brooklyn, went to Manhattan, I think the Upper East Side, and were chanting anti-Bibi Netanyahu stuff, anti-Zionism stuff. And whether that's genuine or not, or just saving face potentially, interesting either way that, even in the, now I'm not sure if that's all Chabad Lubavitch or if there's different sects of Hasidics in Brooklyn or not. But you can tell them from the normal Jews because, they're in their crazy black trench coats and hats with their locks. Like, they're very distinctive. And so that happened in Midtown. And I'm talking like thousands, like seas of these Hasidic Jews were having like an anti-Israel protest in Midtown Manhattan last week rather. So he's not popular. And he's really kind of driven his country's reputation into the ground, and pretty much everybody knows it. They said that, being asked about how will the new government in Gaza operate, they said that the International Stabilization Force will create a local Palestinian government, which will build a local Palestinian police force. And so I'm not sure who's volunteering for this International Stabilization Force. I mean, that's a freaking dangerous job if I've ever heard of one. I wouldn't be surprised if it was like Optimus robots and drones, to be honest, is in this territory. I mean, maybe it'll be like the test ground for like a new type of police state, but we'll see. They did say there will be no U.S. troops in Gaza, and that is the end of my notes from the 60 Minutes interview. So that's pretty much most of what I wanted to present in this video. A couple other pictures here. Here is J.D. Vance this week in Israel visiting the Holy Sepulchre, notably instead of the Wailing Wall, which sends a very different message than what we've seen from other politicians. He has visited the Wailing Wall in the past, but these actions are showing, I think, a shift in direction of, maybe Israel and AIPAC were calling the shots before, and it's the MAGA and the white hats calling the shots now. And I was going to play, the clip of Trump saying that he will not allow Israel to annex the West Bank at the end of this video, but I've already played that. And so just to remind everyone that, the language is getting stronger. The asserting of peace, I would say, is getting stronger. The condemnation of imperialistic actions, or, call it ethnic cleansing potentially, or Israel essentially expanding into all of its neighbors' territory, seems to be being tolerated less and less by the Trump administration. So one of the last pictures I want to show here, which may seem unrelated, But, I've mentioned this before in relation to Gaza, but what you're seeing here is called the Kowloon Walled City, which was originally a walled city or a fort in China in the region of Hong Kong, I believe somewhere around there, that essentially was developed without building codes and became like one of the most dense cities on the planet for a period of time. There was massive sanitation problems, there was massive crime problems, and ultimately this walled city was demolished completely. And people were evicted, forced relocated. Now, when you're talking about that in a country or in, say, like a project, a lot of people don't talk about as well that there was the whole Hope 6 projects going on under, I think, Clinton and George W. Bush in the late 90s, early 2000s, where a lot of the projects in America that became too bad, too violent, were just a disaster, police getting shot at when they went by, were demolished. And essentially, like the point here is that when something becomes too much of a shithole, it gets demolished. And that's not agreeing with the Jewish pastor in the beginning of this video from the Reese report. That's just saying that, urban blight is a real thing, and so is urban renewal, and sometimes things get demolished. Now, ideally, people are not, trash compacted in their apartment buildings through bombing, that they would be, evicted in a more civil manner. But that is not how it's gone down in Gaza, unfortunately. And so we have just, this was Gaza originally, not as bad, obviously, as Kowloon, but bad in different ways. It was extremely dense, one of the densest regions of the entire planet, and had developed a culture that was extremely hostile, and was very violent as well. So I don't agree with the way it's been dealt with, and I don't know if it was the White Hat's original plan to deal with this in this way or not, or if Israel was moving forward with their Greater Israel project and the White Hats have essentially intervened in, the way that they could, while maintaining essentially that Israel was our ally, better ally than Palestine at least. So you know what? It's like, I don't want to say you can't make an omelet without cracking a few eggs, but that metaphor does come to mind. Again, I don't agree with, just bombing these people into oblivion, but it has happened, and Trump didn't necessarily order it, but we are looking at what could be like the Gaza Riviera coming up. And like I said in the beginning, he could have made a resort town anywhere. Why choose Gaza? I think on the deepest level of this, even connecting this to the cult of Baal diagram, why didn't Israel expand into Gaza years ago? Why did they wait till 2023 to stage this October 7th false flag? Why didn't they get Gaza in the original 7-Day War, or like whenever they were expanding? I don't know the entire history in detail, but I think there's a reason, and it's not because of Palestinians' military might. Israel has had more military power than Palestine this entire time. However, they left Gaza where it was. They let it get that dense. They built the wall around it. They turned it into an open-air concentration camp for decades, I think because they were essentially farming humans in Gaza, was the point of it. And I'm not even sure if they wanted to expand Israel into Gaza. Maybe that was their ultimate goal, but I think part of their goal was to essentially have their little human farm caged in there, harvesting organs, harvesting children, harvesting loosh. There's a spiritual, extra-dimensional, extraterrestrial factor in this as well, going all the way back to the ancient god of Baal, of human sacrifice, who is not completely unrelated to Yahweh, the God of the Jews. And so I think that, changing the government of Gaza, and it's not being Israel, is going to be this international force. this could really, like, even if Israel had taken it over, it could have still been somehow, having a whole underground infrastructure of human sacrifice, which a lot of that has been destroyed. And if this international faction, this international stabilization force, takes control of the region, it could actually be able to eliminate that base function of Gaza, which was human farming and organ trafficking and children trafficking, and being like the capital of human sacrifice. And so, like I said, it hasn't been a pretty process to get here, but I think that with this peace plan, we could actually see a lasting shift. Like, we could finally be starving the old gods and the reptilians of their need for human sacrifice in Gaza. And this is a master game of 5D chess going on here. And so I like this last image of Trump, King Trump, doing his thing. And, I made this image on Grok of the Trump Towers in the Gaza Riviera just for fun. It's like, I don't think he's going to put his name on every tower there. Like, that's kind of like what the liberals' like worst nightmare would be. So, hopefully the contracts, whatever they are, will be awarded in a way that will be best for everybody, will be best for Gazans and best for the world. And I mean, if it does look like this, are Gazans going to be able to afford to live there is a big question. If they want to turn it into Monaco, I mean, we're just going to have to see what happens. But the bottom line is, watch that interview with Kushner if you really want to know like the vibe and get even more details than what I presented. Like, I took notes on everything I thought was the most important points, and we've gone through those in this video, so you may not have to watch it. Of course, this video has clocked in at the exact same amount of time as the interview itself, so failed there to do a summary, but I think this probably offered a much deeper analysis into like the more occulted aspects of this. And, just a reminder to don't get pulled into the black-pilled spiral of despair, because where does that lead us? If Trump is in Israel's pocket and we're just going into the New World Order, what's the delay? Why don't we have digital ID in America? Why so many different things? Why am I still making videos? Why am I not in a concentration camp? There are problems with the theory of the deep state being in full control. Like, there does seems to be this faction that is more benevolent that has taken hold since Trump came into office in 2017. And so I'm still on board. And even with the East Wing demolition, like, was the main story this week. The two stories this week, at least on Twitter, seem to be the EBT welfare and SNAP recipients freaking out over SNAP ending because of this government shutdown, which ostensibly is the Democrats' fault. But now, if the white hats are in full control, as we like to say, this government shutdown could be part of this bigger plan of the white hats to make some more radical changes to the federal government, to implement some of the ideas that Doge put forward. But do I agree with EBT benefits being cut in the government shutdown? Well, we don't want to see a spike in crime, but I disagree with people just being lifelong welfare recipients, I would say, with no plans of getting a job when they're perfectly capable human beings, if you can call them that. And like, the other big story was the East Wing demolition, which I will give it. I think Trump got caught in a little bit of a lie on that one, because he is on camera saying that like the East Wing, we're going to respect the building. Like, we're not going to mess up the East Wing for this ballroom. And it has been completely demolished, like down to the ground, which, I mean, honestly, like the liberals will try to find anything to pin on him. And I think he was caught in a little bit of a lie there. But at the end of the day, like, who even knows what's in the East Wing? I mean, the White House is all about the White House, and what the West Wing is the only one anyone has heard of. So I think the East Wing will be much improved by this renovation, which is privately financed by a lot of Trump's top donors, including, Ripple, hello, Coinbase, and yeah. And by the way, there's also the presidential's emergency bunker under the East Wing And he has mentioned that the military is involved in this renovation. And so we could be also getting some upgrades to that presidential military bunker potentially, you know, and maybe even removing some forms of sabotage from it perhaps, or hardening it for what may be coming. Who knows? But I'm not worried that the new ballroom's gonna, you know, make the White House any less important or any less than it was before. I think it will be an improvement, and, you know, increasing the security of the president's emergency bunker may be needed as well. So that's going to be it for this one. Thanks for tuning in, guys. Don't forget to support us at dsmp.io. We've got big crystals, we've got neon lights, posters, t-shirts, body products. We've got it all. So dsmp.io, like, subscribe on New Templars, and we'll be back next week doing some more analysis on either current events or maybe get into some ancient history. We'll see. Whatever my passion leads me to will be the subject. And so we'll see you guys later. Have a great weekend. Godspeed, New Templars.
He could have undermined the messaging so much that he can actually control exactly what people think.
You've been living in a dream world, Neo. This is the world as it exists today.
Welcome to the future of finance.
Our movement is about replacing a failed and corrupt political establishment with a new government controlled by you, the American people.
What's going on, Mr. President? You'll find out. You'll find out.
Just now we saw a black triangular craft fly right through those two mountains.
And how far we're willing to go to fight to keep it this way.